Hey y'all, it's Hip at Crafty Hip and welcome. I am gearing up to work on the week 2 Seek, Gather, Create challenge. This is a mixed media scavenger hunt challenge that mostly takes place on Instagram. It comes from Lisa, Tina, Laura, and Melanie. I'll put all their links below. And basically every week for a month, and they do this twice a year. So in the winter, which is now, and then in the summer they'll do it again. So this is the winter edition, and they give you 4 prompts each week for 4 weeks, sometimes 5, but mostly 4. And you make something, anything. And yeah, I really love what I made last week. I don't have it here. I'll link it, but it's time for a new week. So this week, the prompts are button, woo, something lilac, less woo, mesh, and a heart. So I'm going to show y'all what I've pulled out. I'm starting to formulate an idea now that I've pulled all of these things out. And we'll get to that. So let me tell you what I've pulled out. So for button, I started by pulling out, I've got some buttons separated by color. So I found this little button, which is kind of a lilac color. But I was also thinking that lilac, for some reason, I thought might go really beautifully with bright blue. But so I pulled those out, but I think I'll probably end up just using a mother of pearl button. I've got loads of them. They're one of my favorite things in the world. So that will likely be what happens. We'll see. I've got tons of buttons. I'm a button hoarder hardcore. So something lilac really made me hesitate. I just didn't know what to do. The only thing I could come up with lilac in my stash was the shaded lilac stuff from Tim Holtz. So I've got the Distress Oxide, a Distress Crayon, and one of the Distress markers. I don't even know if it works. But, so I came up with that, and then I saw Kirsten, who is House of Chaos Art, on Instagram. She used some embroidery floss and in a lilac to work on her project, and I was like, oh, that's a really good idea too. So I pulled that out, and then as I started gathering things, I was like, y'all, I have buttons. I have not buttons. I have beads. Beads upon beads upon beads. So I pulled out these, I think are probably more lilac, but these miracle beads, I think that's what they're called. I always want to call them wonder beads. I think they're miracle beads, are kind of a lilac as well. It's hard to see. So that was lilac. So I've got those things. And then for mesh, I just kind of went looking through things. I thought I had something else or that I was going to use something else. But then I just happened to spy this piece of like lacy mesh, whatever. But the corners here are definitely meshy. So I think that's what I'm going to use. And so that's the only mesh that I pulled out. Again, I have more lace and all kinds of stuff I could probably find. I've got a sack that I think Satsuma's came in that's made out of mesh. So, and then for heart is really, really hard for me, y'all, because I don't really tend to make a lot of stuff with the motif of a heart. So I turned to, I've got several drawers of charms for my jewelry making. So I pulled out all kinds of little charms and cabs and all kinds of things with hearts on them. And the last one I pulled out was this, which was made from some Tim Holtz grunge boards. I was like, oh, I could use a grunge board heart. So I pulled one of those out, and I think that's what I'm going to use. But I also have some stamps. I've got a hand-carved eraser stamp, and then this is also, I believe, a Tim Holtz stamp with a heart on it. But I don't think I'm going to use those. I really think I'm going to use the grunge board. And I think it's very possible I'm going to make a jewelry piece. That's yeah, that's where I'm kind of leaning. So I'm gonna get started on that, and hopefully this doesn't take real long, but it's gonna be a little assemblage necklace, I think, is where we're going with this. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. The first thing I am going to do is paint that heart with some black gesso. I've cut out a lot of these repetitive things. Basically, this heart got 2 coats on each side, 2 coats on the front, 2 coats on the back of black gesso. So I did dry with the heat tool between these coats just to kind of speed up the process. But you can see just some black gesso trying to give me a good base for it. Now once that was all good and dry, I'm going to stick down some of that mesh lace stuff. So I'm cutting it down just to make it a little bit easier to work with. and use my matte gel medium to get it stuck down. This was a bit fiddly, and again, I cut out some portions that were repetitive. Like once I got it fairly stuck down, I trimmed it again just to get some of the stuff hanging off the side from it. So you can see, yeah. And this took quite a bit more gel medium than I thought. That I don't know what that mesh lace was made out of, but it doesn't feel natural once you try sticking it down, because it did not want to stick. I was trying it not to fill in the holes with the matte gel, but yeah, it excuse me, it didn't want to stick. So I did, you can see here, go around the sides and trim it down, but it does want to stretch a little, so I had to come back and as it moved and get just some of these little prickly tiny things like that off the edges. So this was all, I knew this was going to be texture for this, and it looks really neat just sitting there on top of that black gesso, but I really wanted to give it a little something more. We'll get to that just as soon as I get that all trimmed. So I let that dry, let the stickiness go away, and then I'll come back in with more of that black gesso to make it all even. Like I said, it looks really neat with the white there, but we're going to do some other things to make that mesh pop back out so that, I have those two prompts from the Seek, Gather, Create team. So yeah, all right, so I do dry this, and I don't know why I didn't cut that down, but I'm coming in with some Gilder's Paste in Violet, and y'all, my Gilder's Paste is old and dried out, and you're supposed to use a thinner to reconstitute it, so I've got a little bit of mineral spirits that I am trying to use to reconstitute it, and I fiddled with this forever and ever, so I'm going to cut out some of my fiddling. And what I wanted to do was use my finger to rub it, which is fine with the Gilder's Paste, but not so great with the mineral spirits. So I am using a glove, and it just was not coming up. So you see I'm adding more of the mineral spirits and more of the rubbing, and yeah, so this was super fiddly here. And in the end, it really doesn't show up. I don't, but I wanted y'all to see that this is how I tried to color this, and it's going on there a little bit. I'm having to use like the edges of my finger, and what ends up working best is actually that paintbrush that I had there. It got a bit more of the color than anything else. So I don't know if you've worked with dried up Gilder's Paste before, if something other than mineral spirits, that's what I found years ago was what you were supposed to use. The one I have is like low odor, earth friendly, so that could be the problem too, is I went for the least harsh one. So here you see I went ahead and painted inside my heart and the mesh and everything with that little paintbrush. I'm sorry, I'm so far off screen. At this point, I was just like, oh my gosh, just work. Stop being a booger. So there I've got that color down, and I'm going to come in with some Pearl X powder, and I cannot remember what color this was, but it was a violety, you can see, and another small paintbrush, and I am painting on top of that Gilder's Paste. So I probably could have skipped the whole Gilder's Paste portion of this, since yeah. But I wanted y'all to see this is the process I'm using. A lot of times for me, a lot of this is experimentation. That's what I like about the Seek, Gather, Create. It's making me combine things I wouldn't normally combine. I wouldn't normally try to use lilac. But yeah. Okay, that is Gold Leaf Rub and Buff, and I am going to use it to accent that mesh. So this was my plan all along. You can see it was brand new, so I had to break the cap. I've been wanting to use it since it came in. And this, I'm just using my finger to rub across the top of that heart, just to pick up the texture of the mesh. This is one of my favorite things. I will say that it had gotten so stiff that rubbing that mesh kind of like hurt my finger almost. And then I'm going to go around the edges as well, just to give it kind of almost a soldered effect. Not that you solder in gold, but just to accent those edges as well.
And rest assured, I washed my hands between all of these layers. Anything that touched my hands got washed. So I'm bringing in my button now. And I'm bringing in my button now. Sorry. And this is where I'm trying to figure out where I want it to go, and I'm going to need some holes. I didn't want to glue it uh, per se, because I thought, yeah. Anyway, I wanted to tie it on there. So I've got my crocodile too that I'm going to use to punch holes because it's nice and sturdy and heavy to punch those holes through that grunge board and everything. But I used pencil to make those marks and could not see them. So I've got just a white paint pen there that I made my marks with, and then I'm using the smaller of the two holes on the crocodile to punch one hole like that, and then the other. And I'm trying to make sure that there's I don't have those up against each other. I want two distinct holes. I want there to be some of that grunge board between them. And then to turn this into a necklace, I'll need holes at the top as well. And I'm making sure my button goes over those holes. Just, didn't want to have to start over. And so I'm going to do again, bring in that white paint pen and just mark where I want the holes and go in. And when I punch these holes, it's really important to me that I don't get them too close to the edge. I do not want this to be something that will break through, because then I don't have a pendant at all. So I did some of the white when I punch these is exposed, but I'm going to fix that here in just a second. You'll see how. So those are punched. I'm trying to clean up those holes a little. So I'm going to trim off some of that grunge board that's like coming through. I've got a pokey tool. What is it? It's a little bamboo skewer that I'll go through the holes just to kind of push out any of that excess grunge board and then trim that off. And the thing I'm going to do to kind of get some of that color away, I'm going to grab, because I could see a little bit of the white on there from the paint pen, I'll grab that distress marker in shaded lilac. I was sitting there trying to think about it, what I wanted to do. But yeah, that worked perfectly. Just use that distress marker. And what I did was I colored the white, but then I decided you could see the inside of those holes. And so I'm going to go ahead and use that marker to just put it down in the holes, front and back, and add that shaded lilac to it just to take away that like brown papery color that was on there. So easy peasy. Made it feel a little more professional or something. Excuse me, gosh. I'm a little froggy today. All right, so there is that. And what I want to do for my final step to make this a little more substantial is use some UV resin. So this is Blue Moon, I think that's what it's called, Blue Moon Beading Resin from Michaels. And I am putting it on the face of this, avoiding the holes. I've got, you see that super cheap paintbrush, going around the whole surface of this and getting it completely coated. And then what you do is you put it under a UV lamp, like those lamps you use with gel nails, or you could put it in direct sunlight. And it doesn't take super long for this to cure. I think, I think I did 1.5 to 2 minutes for each of them. And I did 2 coats of this, so I'm not going to show y'all both coats because I did 1 coat and the edges weren't great. So I went back in and just did, the edges and spread it back out. I love playing with UV resin. I love resin in general, and this UV resin is so like instant gratification. That is totally my jam. So, but if you don't have UV resin, you could also use like diamond glaze or glossy accents or something like that. And now we're coming in with that embroidery floss in that lilac color, because I lost a lot of that lilac color in somehow it just faded in the background, that black, and it looks almost denim now instead of the lilac. And I don't know how that happened. But between the beads and the embroidery floss I'm using, I'm bringing that lilac right back in. So I, as you saw, threaded my needle and I went in through the front of my button, through my grunge board into the back, and I am just going to do, I think, like 3 passes through this to make sure it's nice and secure. If you want, you can add some glue or resin to the back, over the back of it. I might go back and do that, but for now I just did the 3 passes, and I am doing a nice, super tight double knot there. And then I'm going to trim down I was trying to find scissors, trim down my extra threads, and then fray them a little. This is a thing you'll see in lots of my assemblage when I tie buttons to the front of things. I like to have those exposed threads. I like the extra texture that the fraying adds. It's just, yeah, I think it's cute. Just like that. And now we're going to turn this into a necklace using some beads. So I've got those 2 lilac beads and a piece of gold 22 gauge wire, and I'm making a wrapped loop. Now I have a tutorial on that. I will link that in the upper right corner, but I start by making a loop around my round nose pliers. And then I'm going to insert that into my grunge board and then wrap that tail that's there up a little ways. I'm sorry this is so fast. Like I said, I do have that tutorial. You could also use jump rings for this and attach loops if that's more your jam, but I like it to be super secure, so I like just the wrap loops. So I'm putting my bead on. I'm going to make another wrapped loop here. You can see it a little bit better. I take my round nose pliers. Actually, first I've got chain. I've got a long length of chain, and I'm going to cut it in half by inserting both ends of the chain onto another piece of wire and finding that center. And where that center is, I'm going to trim. So in there I lost my center. So I'm hanging it back up again, finding that center link and trimming that off. If yours has like an even number of links, you may have to trim 2 pieces of the link off. All right, so I made a 90-degree angle. I'm wrapping to make a loop where that before I close my loop, I'm going to slip on that piece of chain, then close that loop, and then wrap that tail around through. I think I do 4 times on here. And then I will trim the excess. And I'm going to show you all the other side of how to do this again. So we're going to grab that wire. We are going to make a large loop since we've got to insert it onto our heart. So it's a pretty large loop. Open that loop, insert it onto the heart, close that loop, and then wrap that wire. Super easy. If you have any questions about this, please ask me below. Like I said, I have a tutorial on wrap loops that should make it a little bit clearer. So once I trim it, I tuck down that edge. I'm going to insert my bead. I'm going to start another loop. So bend it, make a loop. Before I close my loop, I'm going to insert my chain. Make sure that's on there nice. Close that loop and then make several wraps. And this gets a little tangly because I've got all that chain dangling there, and it's, yeah, I was fiddling with it a bit. So I'll trim that, tuck the end a little, and the last thing to do is add a clasp. So I'm going to get a small jump ring, a clasp, and then a larger jump ring to use as the other side of my clasp. And all I have to do is open my jump ring. These actually come opened in this little kit, but I will put the small jump ring on to my chain and then the clasp, and then twist to close my jump ring. And yeah, make sure it's very close so it doesn't go sliding off. And then on the other side, I'm just putting that larger jump ring and closing it. And that is it for this necklace for the Seek, Gather, Create challenge. I included all 4 of those prompts, and I got this super cute necklace. It was perfect for Valentine's Day, but y'all, I think with the lilac, it really can be perfect any time of the year. All right, like I said, let me know if you have any questions. If you like this, give me a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe, and I will see y'all again soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.